Day 2 of Brexit Britain. How are you feeling? We're live in Westminster for a Newsnight special as Britain and Europe start working out how exactly this conscious uncoupling will proceed and what Brexit actually means.
In Brussels, they want answers. When will the British government formally declare its intention of leaving? And what sort of relationship does it want with the EU in future? And they're getting increasingly impatient. They want those answers quickly.
From the Conservative Shires to Labour's northern heartlands, they voted out. But who are the Brexiteers and what do they want?
Boston and Lincolnshire voted 80-20 to leave the EU. Lambeth and London voted 80-20 to remain in the EU. How did we get such a divided country and what's going to bring it back together?
Hello, we voted to leave the EU yesterday, so should we get a move on or should we take a bit of time to pause and think? The British Commissioner in Brussels, one of the most senior figures there, Lord Hill, well, he's got to move on by resigning. He's being replaced by a Latvian. But British policy is to slow things down a bit. We need a new Prime Minister for a start. Even the official Leave campaign, so keen to get us out, wants time to do so. But many European counterparts, well, they want things to get going, thinking we voted out, so go now go, walk out the door, to coin the words of an old song. But can they force us to rush things? Well, it all comes back to the magic of Article 50. Our political editor Nick Watt is with me. Nick, a little refresher on Article 50.
Yes, Article 50 is the formal mechanism in the Lisbon Treaty that allows a member state to leave the European Union. Throughout the referendum, Vote Leave said that the initiative lies with the member state to trigger it, and indeed David Cameron has said he's not going to do it. He's going to leave it to his successor as Prime Minister, which means the earliest it could be triggered by the UK would be October. Now, it's interesting. The European Council has issued a statement tonight, which at one level backs that up. It says it is the initiative of the member state to trigger it, but it then says get a move on.
Right, but you've got some intelligence on what some of the member states are telling us about this.
Well, it's pretty clear that Angela Merkel is sympathetic to that slight pause, but what I'm hearing is that member states are saying to Britain it does need to be triggered by the end of this year, and the reason for that is they want the negotiations concluded by the end of 2018, because in 2019 the leadership of all the European institutions changes, so they need to turn their mind to that. But there is a second thing, and to understand this, perhaps we should look at the actual wording of Article 50. Now, the second sentence of Article 50 says a member state that is seeking to leave the European Union shall notify the European Council of its intentions. Key word there, shall. Vote Leave says that means we will decide whether to do it. But what Britain is hearing from some member states is that shall implies in law an obligation.
Must.
You have an obligation to notify. Right. And if you don't notify, then perhaps you could be in breach of Article 50 and we might give you a prod.
Right. So they might try and invoke it or initiate it themselves. Look, why does it matter quite as much as everybody thinks it does that we try and delay or slow down this Article 50 business?
The reason why Vote Leave would like to delay is because once you've invoked it, you have very few cards to play. Because what would happen when you do that is that the remaining 27 member states, amongst themselves, without the UK, would agree what's called a negotiating mandate. They would probably hand that to the European Commission to negotiate with us. That then has to be agreed within 2 years, and you can only extend it if every member state agrees to. So if it doesn't happen, a guillotine comes down after 2 years.
Right, and you leave on the sort of the most neutral of terms, which may not be the most favourable of terms. Nick, thank you very much. Well, a key requirement of sorting out the separation arrangements is that we know what relationship we want with Europe instead, but also that Europe knows what it wants our relationship to be. Well, on that latter point, our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, reports from Brussels.
Things are moving now on Brexit. It's just many people can't work out in exactly which direction. And in a city renowned for its addiction to waffle, even the best minds are grappling with new realities, like how on earth Article 50 will work.
The short idiot's guide to Article 50 is also the expert's guide on Article 50 because we don't know. It is obvious that it's drafted to give the EU a negotiating advantage. It is 2 years of negotiations. If no agreement is made in those 2 years, then there is automatic cutout. It can only be extended by unanimous agreement among member states. And so there is a big disadvantage to the leaving country of triggering the procedure.
Adding to that sense of movement, the resignation of Britain's top EU official today. He felt the referendum results had made his position untenable.
When something as huge as the decision in the British referendum takes place, actions have consequences, and I think that it's not possible for me to carry on properly. You have to listen to the will of the British people that's been expressed.
The process of agreeing a common European response got underway with the foreign ministers of the 6 founding EU states meeting in Berlin today. On Monday, Donald Tusk, who chairs the Union's Council, its meetings of national leaders, will go first to Paris for talks with François Hollande and then to Berlin to see Chancellor Merkel. He'll try to forge a common approach for a European summit in Brussels on Tuesday, where David Cameron will be present to give the British view of the way ahead. And then on Wednesday, he'll be left out of the discussion as the other 27 seek their way forward. Today's Berlin meeting urged a Brexit as quickly as possible. But the Germans are also saying that there can be some time before the leaving process formally starts, and that the UK does have choices about its future relationship.
We will deal with all the countries in an equal way, and that means that should be not punished, we should calm and firm. It means that there should be no revenge, no punishing, but we have to keep up the rules. And it means such solutions like the Norwegian solution, we have to fulfill the obligation as everyone else.
The question is, how long will it take to negotiate this divorce agreement? My intuition, for what it's worth, is that it might take much longer than both sides either wish or expect.
So to Churchill's bar to consider the new rules while Wales and Northern Ireland jockeyed for advantage. The EU now wants Britain to say what kind of deal it wants, whether it's willing to play by single market regulations about the free movement of people, and European leaders want the negotiation stopwatch to start soon.
Mark Urban there. Well, I'm joined now by the UKIP MP, Douglas Carswell. Very good evening to you. Thanks for coming out here. Are you in the camp who wants to delay a very long time to invoke Article 50, or do you think we should get on with it?
We want to get this right, and we want to act in good faith and do what's right for ourselves and our neighbours and build a new consensus in the country. And that means there's absolutely no need to rush into this. There are 2 or 3 things we need to get right first. First of all, we need the right people overseeing the process. The old mandarinate who got us into this mess can't be trusted. You've got to have people like Michael Gove, Chris Grayling, Daniel Hannan overseeing the process. Then we need to informally work out the outline of a deal, and there is.
But we do that after we invoke Article 50.
No, and then I think.
Hang on, so we do all of. I mean, we have to obviously get a Prime Minister before we invoke it, but you're not suggesting we get the outline of a deal before we invoke it?
I think there are important things that need to be discussed before we invoke Article 50.
What's wrong with just invoking it very quickly and saying, look, and then we start the negotiation, which is the system?
Article 50 is basically just a stopwatch. And once you press the stopwatch, you've got 24 months. Why rush it? We've waited 40 years to get this right. Why give ourselves an artificial deadline?
But it's a 2-year deadline. We were told before the referendum it was going to be dead easy. There's not going to be a problem negotiating because they want to sell us BMWs. They've got a balance of payments.
I think it is fairly straightforward, and the noises from Angela Merkel were very encouraging. Right. But it's important to get this absolutely right. We want to be good friends and good neighbours.
Can I just end of year? We should be invoking it by the end of the year. We can't just leave them waiting forever.
Correct.
So we'll all agree by the end of the year. You think? Yeah. Okay. The model of what we're going to aim at, or what you would like us to aim at, when we think about what that model is, there seems to be some disagreement or some differences of opinion among the Leave camp over what it should be. Now, do you think an association agreement let's call it something half out rather than fully out. Do you think that's acceptable?
No, leave means leave, and that means that no EU institutional court will have jurisdiction. Right. We will decide for ourselves the nature of our relationship. But having said that, we're not in the business of closing our borders. So, for example, we would decide our migration policy. It would be for us to make those decisions, but how we decided and what those decisions were would be for a future government and a future parliament.
So you would not be in one of those who says rule out the single market, for example.
Oh, absolutely. We must rule out the single market. We
can't be in the single market.
We want access to the single market, obviously, but we must not be part of the single market. We must not be subject to the jurisdiction, and that's for a simple reason. There are many UK businesses that don't sell to the single market. Right. Why should they have to comply with single market rules?
Right. And free movement, I mean, I'm just wondering whether you think, and you interpret the vote as, the referendum, as a vote that says free movement absolutely has to go. So anyone who suggested a deal with Europe that maintained free movement,
there will be an end to unrestricted free movement. The precise nature of those restrictions is for a future government and a future parliament to decide, but it will be we, Britain, who make those decisions.
Is there a bit of wiggle room on this? Because I know Dan Hannan on our programme was talking about free movement of labour potentially, but not free movement of people.
There's absolute consistency. There will be restrictions on free movement, but a future parliament and a future British government, like in Australia, will decide the nature of those restrictions.
Now look, you're a great believer in parliamentary sovereignty. In fact, sovereignty was important to you. What should MPs do who've seen that there's a vote to come out, but believe, and many of them do, I think, believe that the best option would be one that keeps us in the single market and perhaps even keeps free movement if that's the price of being in the single market?
If we remain...
Do MPs have to say, no, that's been voted against or not?
Vote Leave was very, very clear on this. We want to leave the single market. If we remain part of the single market, of course we want access to the single market, but if we remain part of the single market, that is not leaving. If we remain part of the single market, that is a pub.
So what I'm getting at is MPs are not entitled, in your view, to come to their own view about what the referendum says.
Leave must mean leave, but when we leave, we want to do it in a way that is constructive.
We didn't ask the public whether they want the Norway option or the Swiss option or the Turkish option, did we?
With respect, no one in Vote Leave ever talked about those. You talked about that quite a lot, Evan, but no one in the Vote Leave campaign ever championed the Norway model or the Swiss model. We want a British model in the interests of Britain. We're the fifth largest economy in the world, and we can get that.
What is to stop MPs saying our interpretation, which may not be the same as your interpretation, our interpretation is, in the single market, out of the EU, is perfectly consistent with what the people have told us?
Political elites don't like allowing the people to decide these things, and there will always be some within the Westminster Village who try to do that. The whole point of having a referendum is it gives a democratic mandate to Vote Leave for change.
And the Norway option is not consistent with what we've just voted on. It's doesn't even start.
You keep talking about the Norway option. With respect, Vote Leave has never invoked the Norway option.
Well, a single market with free movement. Just a quick one. Nigel Farage has not got a place in a committee Vote Leave are putting together to try and start thinking about some of these issues. Do you think he should have?
Nigel made a conscious choice not to be part of Vote Leave. I think it's only right and fair that we also take into account the fact that 48% of people in this country voted for Remain. We need to find a right tone that is conciliatory. Only 13% of people voted for my party at the last general election. This is bigger than any one person or any one party. We need to try and build a new consensus.
Right, so he's not the right tone and shouldn't be in the kind of proceedings.
This is going to be led by Vote Leave's leadership, and I think that is absolutely right. We've got a democratic mandate to make that happen, and we will.
Douglas Carswell, thank you very much indeed. Well, it might matter in all of this what the people of Britain want. We've asked them one question in the referendum about EU membership, but we didn't drill down into the details about what exactly should replace it. Would people prefer right out, half out, or what? We asked Katie Razzle to go and find out.
Just after 7:05, if you're just waking up, just joining us, you're waking up to a different country. The UK has voted to leave the EU.
It's a new dawn and a time of questions about the people who voted for Brexit and what they actually want.
Independence Day, tremendous.
Great news for the industry.
Marvellous. For England.
In North Tyneside yesterday morning, euphoria at the quay, in a place where a dozen or so fishing boats still operate.
It's a great day for myself waking up this morning in Great Britain to see that we've got our independence back.
At the North Shields fish market, these traders of course see the EU as the source of their industry's woes, but their outvotes were about far more.
The people's spoken.
and just wanted to change and out against the government, the bankers, whatever you want to call it, legislation in Brussels and everything. People's just had enough.
The North East sent that Brexit message loud and clear. Inequality, the threat from globalisation, alienation from Westminster all played their part.
They've misunderstood the working classes. You know, it's okay them listening to the bankers and all these people in London. The government should have sat up and listened before it's got to this stage. How they move things forward, I'm really, really unsure, you know.
The ferry between North and South Shields is a regular commute, but these are not regular times.
To help this great country succeed. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister's resigned, a 3-month transition period, emotional Prime Minister.
From people who'd voted in, and there were some, fear about what the future holds.
People like me are just very scared. It's a huge gamble. Don't know what's out there. We need concrete facts, which we're not going to get.
But here, even those who voted out didn't have clear ideas about the next steps.
For England to be England again, to do our own thing, to control our own money.
No one really told me exactly what was going to happen if we voted out, if we were voted in, so I thought
you decided to take the risk?
Yeah, I thought it's better than just sitting there and wishing things would change. At least we're doing something about it.
Change is perhaps a big ask in a deprived region which has set so much store by this vote. Remainers say central pledges made by Brexit politicians during the campaign are now being rowed back from, on NHS spending and getting immigration down. This ex-city trader invests in North East charities.
I do feel that there was an element of a con trick in this where some, if I'm crude, generally some rich white men got sections of the population to go with them on a journey that wouldn't benefit the population, that will benefit the careers of the rich white men. And I think that time will bear me out.
So much of England voted out, from the once proud industrial heartlands in places like South Shields, all the way to the Conservative shires. This was a union of voters that's changed the face of Britain. Well, hello, Miles.
Hello.
Katie.
Welcome to a new era.
That's how you're feeling?
Oh, yes.
Positive?
Yes, very positive.
Feeling happy? Hello.
Yes, I really am, actually.
Yeah.
But it's nice that somebody wants to talk to us because our grandchildren don't.
They're not happy with you?
No.
250 miles from North Shields, Miles and Juliet McNair are unlikely bedfellows with Tyneside's Brexiteers. Now that we are going out, what was it that you voted for? What did you want?
Above all, regaining our own sovereignty. That was the absolutely main and prime reason.
Yeah, the independence, really.
What do you want them to negotiate? What are your lines in the sand? Sovereignty as in running our own laws.
Absolutely.
That's absolute line in the sand.
Yeah.
Control of our borders and immigration?
Yes.
You want that?
Well, I think
I want it in a modified form.
But you might accept the Norwegian model, freedom of movement with an emergency brake?
Yes, the basic British sense of tolerance should apply here.
In their Warwickshire constituency, the majority voted out. If they don't bring down immigration, will that be a problem for you as someone who voted out?
Yes, I think it will. Yeah, because at the back there is that option as well. We're full. It's not a racist thing, we're full.
I didn't actually vote for immigration, to be honest with you. That wasn't that wasn't my first motivation to vote. I know everybody talks about it, but that wasn't the real reason.
What Leave actually looks like is still unravelling. With the outvote rooted in so many different communities, delivering on that mandate will be no easy task.
Katie Razzle there. Well, as well as dealing with the EU, politics at home is heating up in the Tory leadership race. The forces are lining up for and against the bookies' favourite, Boris Johnson. Here's our political editor, Nick Watt again.
For the moment, Boris Johnson appears to have the Conservative Party in his hands. He is no doubt hoping that the gods, who have a way of reminding mere mortals who is in charge, will be on his side.
So it was all to do with race, race and race.
Amid the continuing fallout from the referendum, business at Westminster has all but ground to a halt. But behind the scenes, Tory MPs are calculating whether Boris is unbeatable in the leadership contest, which will be underway within a week. The Remainers, as the pro-European Tories call themselves, are meeting on Monday to discuss tactics. Newsnight has learnt that there is a growing realisation in the George Osborne camp that he will struggle to gain traction because he is so closely associated with a failed Prime Minister. Shares in the Energy and Climate Change Secretary Amber Rudd are one of the few things that are performing well at the moment, but her allies know that it would be a tall order to beat Johnson, whose campaigning was seen to have added 2% to the Brexit numbers in the referendum. It was not difficult to detect the weary mood in the Remain camp as the Prime Minister discharged his duties on Armed Forces Day. Some on his side who lament the political forces which ejected him from office say the next leader must be a healer.
In my view, a great Prime Minister leading a great and reforming administration, mainstream conservative one-nation reform has been taken out at the knees by the savagery of this political earthquake. And in choosing a replacement for David Cameron, we have to pick not just a person, but I think we need to develop a programme that brings the party together, but more importantly brings the country together, that speaks not just to the 52 who voted to leave the European Union, but the 48 who wanted to be part of a forward-looking and global Britain.
It's your fault, Jeremy! It's your fault! Oh, it's your fault! When are you resigning? It's your fault! It's your fault!
Labour is facing its own bout of soul-searching after Jeremy Corbyn's underpowered performance in the referendum campaign. A rather different reception awaited Labour's most senior elected official at the Pride rally, as he said that London should fight hard to maintain core aspects of Britain's EU relationship.
What's clear from the results on Thursday was London was the only region in England to vote to remain in the EU, overwhelmingly so. It's also clear to me that London is a powerhouse for our country. The idea that London won't be around the table is ridiculous. The Prime Minister, the current one, and the future one needs to make sure we have a seat around the table. He or she needs to make sure that we're inside the room when it comes to doing a deal with the European Union.
The Prime Minister was a spectator today as the Red Arrows marked Armed Forces Day. Within days, he will be an onlooker again as the race to choose his successor gets underway.
Love the Red Arrows. Nick Watt there. I'm joined now by the Conservative MP and Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Robert Halfon. Good evening.
Good evening.
And you're sometimes called the Minister for Blue-Collar Tories. How is your party going to reconnect with those blue-collar Tories? Because nobody seems to be connecting with them very well at the moment.
Well, I think we've got a major challenge. We need to reconnect with the millions of working class voters who have left the Labour Party, which is a huge challenge for them as well. We need to reconnect with the people who have voted to remain, the 48%ers, and we also need to reunify the party. In terms of working people, we've started on the road with the national living wage, with apprentices creating jobs, but we need to do a lot more. And we need to have poverty, dealing with poverty, compassionate conservatism at the heart of conservatism. And I think that is a huge challenge for us.
I mean, obviously this is going to be a debate in the leadership election, but one would have to wonder whether, you know, going from one White-Etonian to another White-Etonian, is that going to cut it, do you think, for those blue-collar workers?
No one has ever said to me, oh, how terrible, the Prime Minister comes from a posh school. In fact, many people would love to send their kids to a posh school if they could afford it. That is not the issue. The issue is whether we're seen as on people's sides and as seen on the side of working people, and that the millions of people who vote leave, right up and down the country in every part of the land, that we speak for them.
But a lot of people have said there's an out-of-touch kind of elite. That's been one of the things that has been a refrain of the referendum campaign. You can't honestly say that Boris Johnson kind of would break through that as an Etonian, would you? I mean, he's just another one of the same, isn't he? And I'm just wondering whether you're trying to get at whether there should be a fresh face, a fresh look, something different.
Well, I accept that there is a kind of anger against the elite, and that was behind many of the people who voted to leave last week, and we have to respond to that as a party. I believe we started down that road. We've got a long way to go. I genuinely don't believe it's about whether people are posh or what background they come from. It's about how we present ourselves, what our narrative. Are we the party? Are we going to be the party for workers? Are we going to be the party for working people? Is someone who is struggling to earn a living going to feel that we're on their side? And that has to be the raison d'etre of any next Tory leader, whoever that may be.
Why don't you stand?
It's not in a million years.
Yeah,
not in a million years.
Connect with those blue
Not
collar
in a million
workers.
years. I just, in my deputy chairman job, I've gone around the country talking about this. It's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that I know. I don't want us just to have a majority of 10. I want us to have a big majority. And the only way we can do that is by reaching out to the millions of voters that Labour have lost, that voted Leave last week.
Do you think if a new leader comes in with any different programme, a different approach, do you think they need to go to the country to seek a mandate at some point before very long?
Well, under the fixed term rule, it's incredibly difficult now to call an election.
If you knock heads together, you can make it happen.
Well, I don't know. I think it is incredibly difficult. I think that will be up to the leader to decide. But I think we've got to cross one bridge at a time. We've got to organise the renegotiations. There's got to be an election of a new leader, and there's got to be a programme to get the Conservatives back with a proper majority by speaking for working people.
Can I ask whether you think the leadership election needs to take the 14 weeks or so that seems to have been allowed for it? I mean, Margaret Thatcher retook the Falklands in half that. When Margaret Thatcher was deposed, that was on a Thursday, there was a new Prime Minister by the Tuesday. We're now about to, at a very important time in the country's history, we're rudderless, and we can't wait 14 weeks for you guys to decide between Boris and Theresa May.
I think this is an incredibly important question. Who is then going to be the next Prime Minister? Who's going to carry on the work that David Cameron started? And don't forget, when Margaret Thatcher was standing, it was only MPs who had the election. We have to go around the country, speak to members all over the country, and they have to they will make the final decision.
Robert Helfand, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, now to finish, the most fraught issue of all, the gulf between inners and outers, the new national divide. It's about class, region, education and outlook. And I have to say, there are urban professionals who voted to remain who are dealing with Brexit with what looks like the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression and maybe acceptance. Many are still, by the way, on anger. As of a moment ago, a petition calling for a rerun of the referendum had received 2.3 million signatures. Can the divided British people cohabit comfortably? Well, Emily has been out trying to make sure we all learn to get on.
If there's one thing we learnt from the vote on Thursday, it's just how divided the country is. Boston in Lincolnshire voted 80-20 in favour of Leave. Lambeth in London, 80-20 Remain. So we brought citizens from each place together. Angie and Nina come from a farming community. They work in delivery services. James and Gajunda, the Lambeth boys, are a lawyer and student respectively. Do they see each other's world, and do they understand the choices they each made? Have a look.
When you voted Leave, was it about the EU? Was it about kicking the government? Was it about change of any kind? Or was it about something that I haven't mentioned?
Everything. Everything.
Right.
Everything. We tried to tell everybody what was happening in Boston. Nobody wanted to listen. You know, we have, when people say, oh right, we're the most segregated town in the country, yeah? Right, what happens is, you get your neighbours, all the housing is full. And it is full of EU migrant workers. They come over here, they live in houses of multiple occupation, they work in the same place. Some of them have been here 4 or 5 years, can't even say hello in English, you know.
I don't doubt in any way that these things are true and that there are these problems in these towns.
Yeah.
What I worry about is that the EU has been blamed inaccurately. I think these problems are there, but that the EU, it isn't the EU's fault.
Why do you think that people have misunderstood?
I think there's been a lot of either deliberate miscommunication or a very difficult conversation in the UK during the campaign. People didn't seem to be talking to each other. They just seemed to either be shouting at each other or believing their own side's truths, and sometimes both those sides' truths could be inaccurate. I, for one, didn't think it was correct to have the 350 million going to the NHS on the side of the battle bus, and since then, Nigel Farage has said, oh, that was ill-advised, that wasn't necessarily true.
Yeah, but do you think that people who voted Leave are thick?
No, I don't think it's about cleverness. I think it's to do with if you only have so much time.
Do you think that that's how the other side think?
Yeah, definitely, definitely, especially with the barrage of things that's come on social media. We know 350 million was not going to go directly to the NHS, but where you get your savings is, the doctor who lives near me, he told me they employ 3 interpreters at 40 quid an hour. We would not have to be paying that through the NHS if we didn't have all this mass migration?
It seems like it's a referendum on the status quo, and I think we need to have a national conversation on how to build a fairer Britain, which everyone feels works for them.
No, I just hope it goes straight forward and it sorts itself out for the younger generation, like kiddies. They've been brought up in this environment, so to speak, due to vandalism, crime, murder, etc., etc. I don't want my children seeing all that, to be frightened to go out. I just want it to get better.
Emily there. One thing you can say, wherever you go right now, people agree on one thing. We're in the midst of a quite exceptional national experience. Life carries on. Glastonbury today, Wales winning football games, Pride, Armed Forces Day, but Brexit is always in the conversation, which is why we've been here on a Saturday night. Let's try not to make a habit of it. I'll be back as usual on Monday. Enjoy the weekend.